The coffee sleeve with my name and two rules. The barista didn't call my name. It was already printed in tidy serif letters around the ribbed cardboard sleeve. MILES. I'd ordered water and a muffin I didn't want, the kind of purchase that lets you stay somewhere you don't need to be yet. It was 6:30. The commuters had thinned, the second-wave students had not arrived, and the shop smelled like good intentions poured too hot. On the back of the sleeve, someone had written with a black pen that didn't apologize for being blunt. If you still prefer repairs to grand finales, 6:55, northwest window, oh, bring water. The pen had scratched the cardboard. The handwriting had practiced stopping. I looked around as if the author might be rehearsing a confession behind the pastry case. Only a teenager staring into his phone as if it had mispronounced him. A woman making a list that looked like it could keep a family alive. And a man in a raincoat whose shoulders had learned patience the hard way. I fix watches in a narrow shop on Maple, where the street forgets it wants to be important. The basement smells like oil and promises that had the decency to be small. I live with Noah, who designs museum exhibits that pretend to have always been there. We have been together long enough to keep the good spoons in the front and to ask for pauses without rehearsals. We don't collect dramas. We stack rituals and let them do the work instead. The northwest window was a square of late light and glass that needed forgiving. The man in the raincoat sat there with two paper cups upside down, the way you practice placing a word before you dare say it. He wore a cartridge ink blue shirt and a face the color of thinking. He looked up when I stopped, but he didn't perform surprise. "You're Miles," he said, not a question so much as a ground wire. "Owen," I said, holding up the sleeve. "And this is a more courteous summons than a spare key." "A sleeve is cheaper," he said, smiling without conquest. "And if you say no, the worst that happens is that your coffee is dressed for the weather." "I ordered water," I said, which complicates the metaphor. "Then we're off to a decent start," he said, and motioned to the chair opposite him. "Will you sit? I brought you the thing you already bought." He flipped the cups and set them down. They were empty. He held up a bottle like a routine. "I don't buy people drinks, I pour them pauses." I laughed because a small laugh is how my body says permission. "Why me?" I asked. I tried to offer the question as you would a watch with a strange sound, without accusing it of treason. "You replaced a cracked crystal on my grandfather's watch last month," he said. "I watched you choose not to polish away the scratch on the case because the scratch was part of the truth, not the injury, the history. You didn't lecture me about it. You asked if I wanted memory or disguise. I keep thinking about people as cases and crystals and how often I've tried to polish the wrong thing." "I'm not a priest," I said. "Good," he said. "They don't tip." From the inner pocket of his coat, he pulled a little cloth-bound notebook. It looked like it had been carried in better weather than today. On the first page, stamped with a calm that didn't apologize, were the words "provisional rules." Under them, in a hand that had rehearsed being neat, "Nostalgia is a witness, not a judge. If either of us says water, we pause. No theatrical exits. If leaving is necessary, we leave, not perform. Kind beats clever. Sit where the exit is visible." "These keep conference calls from becoming disasters," he said. "They also keep kitchens from unlearning what tables are for." "I could add a sixth," I said, and he handed me the pen without mock trial. I wrote 6. If we become cowards, we say so in the present tense. He looked down and nodded like a bolt deciding to commit to the thread. "I'm trying to retire a habit, and I needed to say it near a window," he said. "I've spent a year narrating endings because starting felt impolite. I'd like to learn to keep certain screws snug without stripping them." "What's the habit?" I asked. "Grand gestures," he said. "I've been a stage manager in my own kitchen. I want to practice small, correct time." "Owning a watch shop complicates how I feel about metaphors," I said. "We can try anyway." He poured water into both cups and we drank, which seemed unimportant until it was. He told me he designs lighting for the city, how long a crosswalk stays white, how many lumens are too few for a block that forgot it was safe. I told him about jeweled bearings and mainsprings, tiny tool marks that no one but the wearer will ever know about. We traded the kinds of expertise that don't learn humility at conferences. "Does Noah know you're here?" he asked later, not like a test but like an electrician checking ground. "He knows I went for a walk to return the morning," I said. "He also knows that the way back goes through water." "Then here's the part where I ask you to try something with me," Owen said, and set the notebook at an angle as if the table had become a drafting board. 3 lines each. What we keep, what we avoid. No adjectives we can't carry for the rest of the week. I wrote, "Keep the size of our dinners, the chair closest to the door, the way Noah says, wait, let's find a smaller screwdriver. Avoid always. Avoid letting jokes do the job of honesty. Avoid polishing away a scratch that is not a problem." He wrote quickly, folded the page as if it might deserve a stamp, and slid it under the sleeve. A kid shot past the window, wet jacket flapping like a fish that still believed in rivers. The barista set a tray down loudly to remind the building we were here. Someone opened a book like a door that needed oil. We sat there, not preparing to be noble, just trying not to confuse effort with show. "Tell me the habit you want to retire," I said. "Leaving before I can be kind," he said. "Saying we're done the second I'm scared of losing. Performing the end because patience has no audience." "That can be fixed," I said. "I fix smaller things for a living." He took a breath like a full sentence. "Will you meet again?" he asked, new to the grammar of not forcing. "I will," I said, because I wanted to. We met 3 days later in the museum where Noah had an installation pretending not to be embarrassed by joy. The exhibit was about windows. People looked through one window to watch films of other windows. Owen stood very still and then very near, the way you stand near explanations that might hold. When we sat on the bench by the gallery's exit, he pulled 2 pencils from his pocket the way someone else might produce tickets. "I thought we might write down the names of the tools we misapply and promise not to hand them the wrong job again," he said. I wrote crowbar, spotlight, megaphone. He wrote calendar, script, curtain. We laughed quietly because the bench would have scolded us for less. At home, I told Noah about the notebook and the rule about exits. "It isn't paranoia," he said. "It's manners." He fetched 2 glasses without prompting and set them down with the good spoon's confidence. We said nothing for a minute because the room had accepted our decision not to force it to perform. A week later, my mother called from the hospital 2 towns over to say she had done something brave and ordinary at once, walked to the nurse's station and back, carrying her own water. I drove out with a bag of pretzels and a list of questions that didn't humiliate dignity. She said, "It doesn't burn anymore," and I put that in my wallet without asking whether it would expire. On the way back, I texted Owen one word: water. A few minutes later, he sent back a photo of 2 cups on a stoop, and the caption, "Also this holds." I wrote the same under an image of my mother's sneaker, which had learned to forgive the hallway. We met in the little park by the bakery during the hour the pigeons pretend city life is their idea. Owen brought mandarins. I brought a square of mat board with a window cut out and a printer font word I could swap each month. I slid air into the frame. Because we forget, I said. He slid a small box across the table that read courtesy lights. For your kitchen in December, he said. So the salt doesn't think it has to do it all. Does your kitchen know that yet? I asked. Not reliably, he said, but it's drafty enough to learn. The first time he met Noah was a Tuesday you had to be tender to survive. We chose a diner where the coffee doesn't worry if it's fashionable. We sat where we could see the door. This is our rule, Noah said when Owen glanced at our chairs. We don't stay if the exit feels like a dare. Owen nodded the way crews do when someone triggers the right breaker. We ate. We said the word water when a sentence was about to be asked to do heavy lifting. We thanked each other at the end in a way that didn't audition for sainthood. In the shop, a woman brought me a photograph of her grandparents holding a cake that had decided to stay in the pan. My mother wants it in the living room like a shrine, she said. I wanted to keep breathing. I showed her a slim frame with a mat that offered the picture air. Let the cake be the cake, I said. She laughed for the first time that morning, which struck me as a holy act, and paid like she meant to spend wisely in the future. By August, Owen and I had a commuter's rhythm. We sent each other 3 lines most evenings, what we kept, what we avoided, and sometimes a recording of light dimming the way kindness does, from notable to the thing that makes the rest of the room visible. Noah started writing back some nights with one phrase we didn't know we needed, words put away clean. He stuck it to the fridge, and our conversation stopped tripping over last week's tools. If this were the kind of story that asked you to forgive us, here, where I would confess, what I can tell you is that we kept our exits visible and our glasses full. We resisted writing musicals in each other's foyers. We returned the manual for repairs to the library so someone else could remember they weren't finished yet. Small, cruel days visited anyway. One afternoon, the bus stopped for 20 minutes between streets because a man had sat down on someone else's anger. No one acted saved or offended. We all stayed quiet enough for the driver to speak kindly to the engine. Owen pulled 2 cups from his bag. Apparently he had started packing them as habit, and poured water like an apology none of us owed yet. A teenager across from us accepted his cup and stared at it like evidence that softness is not a rumor. He didn't thank anyone. Thanking would have been a performance the day couldn't carry. In November, a regular client asked for a frame wider than his honors could justify. If you breathe for it, I said, it will breathe back. He thought about it like maybe he'd just been told he could take smaller bites of tomorrow. I kept the coffee sleeve in the watch drawer reserved for parts too useful to throw away and too precious to mistake for junk. At the end of the year, I took it out and wrote 3 new words in that windowed mat. Return, enough, welcome, one after the other, letting the frame be a calendar that never demanded page numbers. On a day that smelled exactly like citrus and wood, I went back to the café where the sleeve had decided to find me. I took out a napkin and copied the 6 rules onto it with the patience I try to spend instead of hoard. The barista recognized my face but not my name. That's all right. Names are inventory. Actions are receipts. When I came home, Noah asked, "What did you fix today?" And I said, "A frame that forgot it was a frame." He smiled. "Water," he said. "Yes," I said, "we poured. We didn't blow out any candles. We let them decide whether to stay. If another sleeve appears with someone else's name, we'll put out 2 cups and sit where we can see the door. We'll let the room do its work. We won't audition for a bigger stage. We'll keep home as a noun that survives new furniture. We'll say the cowardice out loud before it can pretend it had somewhere else to be. We'll pause when anyone says water. We'll keep air around the moments that insist on heavy frames. And when the evening tries to hand us a finale, we'll be rude enough to choose repairs." In the drawer with the old crowns and some hands that still point precisely to a time nobody remembers, the sleeve lies flat. The pen mark has faded a bit. The black has thought about being gray. I touch the ridges sometimes like braille meant for a future version of my palm. Resta, it says. Stay. Not because we owe endurance to spectacle, but because staying is the way small hinges learn our names. Staying lets the door remember it opens both ways. Staying when you can, where you should, makes a table again, two glasses a beginning, a rule book a kindness, and a watch something more than a circle that refuses to end.